Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Blood stains a desolate valley deafened by a cacophony made of steel and bone. Inhabitants of a nearby cliffside village look on in horror as all manner of creature overwhelm their would-be saviors. Warriors charge down steep, narrow paths to join in the fray, but theirs will be a meaningless sacrifice without greater aid. An elderly woman, adorned in tattered robes and various beaded jewelry, ponders the conflict as from her perch along the cliff's edge. A wise woman, the high shaman of the tribe, she can see the outcome of the conflict. Despair weighs heavy in her tears, born of the breeze. She directs her gaze skyward as motes of water, stone, fire, and the breeze itself surround her. As her feet leave the ground, she begins a controlled descent towards the massacre. Clouds gather without warning, threatening violence. The earth below, strewn with corpses and sorrow, begins to come to life. Suddenly and without warning, bolts of lightning crack and strike, finding victims below, charring flesh. The bones of the earth rise, tossing about giants as if ants from a blanket. It takes only a minute for the horde's armed, disfigured, rage-driven monstrosities to identify the source of their imminent destruction as the great Kineticist centers herself 10 meters above the conflict. Spears, arrows, and arcane magics are hurled in her direction, battering her form. But broken bones and torn flesh do nothing to slow her advance. She turns her gaze more directly upon the crowds of fiends, decimating ranks with radiant spheres of expanding, burning flames, and light with the wave of a hand. With the other side, she drives cascading waves of sparkling, life-giving water against horrors previously bent on ending life, thrown carelessly against canyon walls. Her body, racked by all manner of offensive capability, falls as she plummets to the earth. No matter, her goal is met. The tide has been turned, morale raised, and her people, through her sacrifice, saved. Welcome back, adventurers. Today we talk about the next class up on my list, the Kineticist. Kineticists are elementalists with the utmost versatility. They fill a niche in the game in a very unique way and provide for a fantasy that many players really gravitate toward that we don't see in a ton of other systems. Kineticists are a mix between martial and caster. Unlike casters, they don't actually use spell slots or any limited resource like that, but most of what they do is spell-like in effect. At the same time, their most basic attack acts as a martial-like ranged and melee attack. This is about as unique as the system gets, by the way, for a class. The different subclasses for the class are granted by the various elements. In this case, the elements are water, fire, wood, earth, metal, and air. Continuing on our uniqueness train, it is Constitution that makes up their primary ability score. This means that they're going to have very high HP, because, of course, HP comes from your con stat. You're also going to have really great fortitude saving throws, so some nice things you get out of fort. Unfortunately, what this means is you're probably the worst skill monkey in the game because no skill is based on Constitution. With access to light armor, you are best designed probably for use with a high dex as a secondary ability score, but we'll find reasons why that's not necessarily the case for all of the different subclasses or gates, because there are certain feats that will allow you to gain armors that don't require so much dexterity, but by default, it's just light armor, so not amazing out the gate with your armor. If you aren't worried about your AC and just plan on keeping your distance scores, you can always opt to go with Wisdom, Charisma, or Intelligence as a secondary primary ability score, depending on what you want to do with your character. The Inventor may have had a lot to cover at level 1, but it's got nothing on the Kineticist. Let's get into some key terms. The most important of these is impulse. The impulse trait means that any action or activity tied to it relates to your elemental aura and uses your Kineticist impulse attack modifier or DC. This is like a spell attack modifier or DC, but again, it's not spell, so it gets its own special term here. Every impulse requires that you have a free hand in order to do them, and they all have the concentrate trait, so that's just kind of built in there. It also has the elemental trait for whatever element you're doing with that impulse. So don't lose track of that. I mean, they'll be listed generally speaking anyway, but it is always tied in. Everything you do in this class, everything you do with your Kineticist, that is Kineticist tied, is basically an impulse. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that isn't an impulse. Okay, so that's very high level, but key to the class. Now that we kind of understand what impulses are about, let's talk about Elemental Blast. This is your base attack as a Kineticist. This is an impulse that uses one or two actions you get to choose. If you have more than one element, you choose which of those elements you use for your elemental blast. The damage die and range depend on the element you choose. We'll get into that as we talk about all the different gates you can choose or subclasses. This uses your impulse attack modifier, not your save DC. And the impulse attack modifier is level plus training, pretty standard here, plus con modifier. So because con is your primary ability score, we get to use it for your attack modifier. If you use a one action blast, what you're going to do is you're going to deal damage equal to, at least at level 1, the damage dice listed for the element you chose, and that's it. Now, if you're in melee, you get to add your strength modifier. So let's say you took air and it's got a 1d6 damage dice. Then for one action, if you're attacking at range, it's just the 1d6 damage. If you're hitting in melee, it's 1d6 plus whatever your strength mod is. However, if you use the 2-action version of the blast, you still do the dice you're supposed to do. And if you're in melee, you still add strength. But melee or not, you get to add your con modifier to the damage. So at level 1, you're already adding a straight 4, assuming you do the standard style of build where you maximize your primary ability score. So it can be a nice way to get extra damage in there, to where you can actually do pretty significant damage, especially in melee if you go with strength as your secondary with your primary attack. The next is Overflow. An action with the Overflow trait will end your kinetic aura after you resolve it. You have to have your kinetic aura up in order to use your impulses, so after the Overflow, you're going to have to channel elements, which is a special action we get at level 1, to get your aura back. These are usually the strongest impulses and is meant as a tax for using them, because remember, we don't have things like spell slots that we're using up when we're doing these things, so this is a tax on us to make it so we can't just do our strongest impulses over and over and over again, turn after turn, without some sort of having to pay for it. Okay, on to infusions. These are like spell shapes for your impulses. So if you use an infusion, you're always using it before whatever you're going to augment. So they're one action like spell shapes are, and they'll do something to your spells. If you use an infusion and your next action on the same turn isn't to use the related impulse, then the infusion is just wasted. So be careful using infusions if you're not going to use it with the correct follow-up impulse. Then there's the kinetic aura itself, which we already mentioned a little bit. This is an inert aura at level 1 by its base. It is just a 10-foot emanation around you. It takes one action to channel elements, which starts the aura. So this is a special action you get at level 1, but it's necessary for getting your aura going. Once your aura is going, it can just go. It's no time around it, it's just going. But of course, we know that Overflow can end your aura. As part of that one action to channel elements, though, to get your aura going, you can either make a one-action elemental blast for free, or you can enter a one-action stance as part of channeling your elements. So you don't waste extra actions. You already paid one tax, you don't need to pay a second tax. You can take feats that augment your aura. There's actually quite a few, so just keep in mind that the aura can be really important to your build, or you could take none of those and it's just an aura you need up to do your impulses. All right, you think that's probably enough for level 1, but we're not quite done, we're just getting there. Next we have base Kinesis. So this is another action, well this is a 2-action activity you get at level 1. It allows you to kind of augment the natural elements around you tied to the gates that you choose. There are restrictions on what you can do with the element, how much of it you can mess with at a time, and what exactly you can do with it. Usually nothing harmful. This is really maybe some problem solving stuff, some things out of combat you can do. This isn't generally going to be a combat related activity you use, but it certainly can be if you want to use it that way. Very cool in problem solving and role playing though. Finally, I want to talk about composite. So composite is a special keyword that's for impulses that mix two elements together. There are 15 of these because of the different mixes of elements that you can possibly have with the 6 elements. And we're not going to get too deep into those feats, but they do exist and there's only one for each pair. So they don't come up a lot having composite, but some of them are quite good. Okay. With all that talked about, we're finally going to go ahead and talk about the subclasses or the elemental gates. There were 6 gates to choose from, but that's not nearly fun enough for the Kineticist, because Kineticists want to be challenging to make at level 1. So at level 1, you could choose 1 gate, or you could choose 2 gates at the same time. So why would you choose only 1 if you could choose 2? Well, if you choose a single gate, you get an extra benefit at level 1, which is called the Impulse Junction. And we will talk about what each of those Impulse Junctions are as we talk about each gate. If you take dual gates at level 1, you don't get the Impulse Junction for either of them. However, you could take it later as you level up. Interesting. So While you choose a gate at level 1, or 2 gates at level 1, at levels 5, 9, 13, and 17, you can either add another gate to your mix of gates, or you can go deeper down the path of one of the gates you already have. If you go further down the path of one of the gates you already have, you do what's called expanding the aura. You will get a bonus for whichever element you choose to expand. And there are several bonuses or junctions you get to choose from, which will just make you better with those elements in different ways. If you choose to fork the path and add a second gate, you don't get any of those special bonuses for the gates, but you do get to add a feat right there, an impulse, from the new gate you added, so that you get to start using it right away. Each gate will provide a few things. First, you'll get an elemental blast. It'll be a range of either 30 or 60 feet, and it'll be a 1d6 or 1d8. 1d8 for 30 foot, 1d6 for 60 foot. Also listed will be any element types you can choose to use with that blast. So generally, elements will get 2 different options for what kind of damage they do with their blast, except for one specific choice. An impulse junction is also available at level 1 for anybody who takes single gate. And of course, you can take it when you expand the portal later. And then there's a set of other junctions you can take when you expand the portal at a later level if you want to. The first is a critical blast. This is an effect that happens when you get a critical strike with your elemental blast. Second is elemental resistance. This is resistance you gain equal to your level against all creatures and effects with the given traits. So if you had the air trait as a resistance and you gain your level and resistance to anything that has the air trait to it. So air elementals, you're going to get resistance to everything they do. At level 17, you actually become immune to effects that have that trait, but not to creatures themselves. So if an attack had the air trait, you'd be immune to that air trait attack. Next is the aura junction. This is an effect you get to have passively for having your aura active, which is cool. And finally is a skill junction. It's going to list a skill and a skill feat. You become trained in the listed skill unless you're already trained in one, or trained in that one, and then you get a different one. And you get the skill feat listed. What's more interesting is that as long as you have this, you get a +1 to your use of that skill, a +2 at 10th level, and a +3 at 17th level. So if there are skills you want to be really good at, even though you're not a skill monkey, you can go deep in one skill or two if you want to expand the port, or if you want to go deeper in your element. Finally, each of these gets 4 impulse feats at level 1 to choose from, and we're going to go to all of them because on this channel we talk about how to build yourself your level 1 character, and that matters a lot. So we're going to talk about all 4 for each of the 6. So yes, we're going to talk about a lot of level 1 feats. And I will say the majority of the feats in this class, from 1 to 20, are the elemental impulse feats. So once we get into our ranking video, we're going to talk about all of them. For each gate, I am going to run through all the details for level 1 that we talked about, both the junctions and the feats you get and the blast. Really quick, I should call it, again, there are composite feats that require 2 gates in order to take a feat. There's exactly 1 composite feat for every pair of elements. I'm not going to talk about those in this video, though. All right, let's go ahead and jump into our elements with air. The elemental blast is a range of 60 feet. It does 1d6 damage, and you can choose either electricity or slashing damage. So some nice choices there. Your impulse junction, and some of these are really good, some of them aren't as good. This one's nuts, is that before or after you use any impulse, as part of using that impulse, you can stride up to half your speed or step as a free action. If you can fly, you can use it with your fly speed. This free movement is nuts. I have an air kineticist in one of my games, and my goodness, is this a lot of movement. The different gate junctions, the critical blast for air is that you push the target 10 feet. Nice if you're trying to keep your distance, and air really isn't set up to be a melee one. Elemental resistance is electricity and air. Your aura junction is you and your allies get a +10 land or fly speed at the beginning of your turn. So basically you or any allies that start in your aura get a +10 boost to speeds for that round, which is really, really nice. And your skill junction is stealth with the experienced smuggler skill feat, which we haven't covered because I haven't gotten to stealth yet, but still worth looking up. What are your level 1 impulse feat options for air? Well, first we have aerial boomerang, 2 actions. You throw a boomerang in a 60-foot line. All creatures in that line make a basic reflex save against 2d4 slashing damage. This is against your impulse DC. So remember your class DC. On the next turn, you can call it back to you. Wherever you are when you call it back, it'll come back to you, and any creatures in the line on the way back take 2d4 damage again, making that same save. This increases by 1d4 damage every 2 levels. Now, I want to be clear, this is every 2 class levels. Whenever I say that, I'm going to not say the class every time, but when we're talking Kineticist impulses, it's class levels. So every 2 class levels is kind of like 1 level as far as going up spell slots. So two class levels is pretty standard for us here. Sometimes it'll be 3 or 4 though. All right, Air Cushion. This is a reaction for a level 1 feat. You slower creatures fall by 60 feet per round, and they don't take damage when they reach the ground. That target has to be within 60 feet of you to use it, but that's nice and solid to save somebody from a deadly fall. 4 wins. Level 1, 2 actions. You target 4 creatures within 30 feet, and they get to stride half their speed. They don't use their reactions. They just get to stride for free, even though it's your turn. This can be massive for setting up for tactical advantage. Our final level 1 feat for air is Whisper on the Wind. This is 1 action. You basically get a modified version of the sending spell, kind of, letting you send a message to somebody within 500 feet of you that only they are going to hear. All right, so I'm going to give a couple examples of higher level feats for every gate as well. So let's start off with level 8, Cyclonic Ascent. This is 2 actions. You gain a fly speed of 30 feet, or your land speed, whichever is farther. So if you've got a good land speed, you might just be taking that. This flight doesn't treat going straight up as difficult terrain. You can go in any direction at that full speed, which makes you the best flyer in the game. Makes sense, you're air, but that's very, 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 very good. Infinite Expanse of the Bluest Heaven. Oh yeah, you're going to notice some of the names of these at high levels are very fun. Level 18, 3 actions, Overflow. You create a 20-foot burst within 100 feet of you. Any creature in that area or that enters that area has to make a will save, and on a failure, they believe they're infinitely falling through the air. They try to flee each round, but if they fail a check, then they're going to be stuck in there swimming around in the illusion turn after turn, which is amazing. This is crazy control that's really hard for them to break out of and is also just hilarious. All right, so that's air. Let's jump into earth. Elemental Blast is a range of 30 feet, 1d8, bludgeoning or piercing, so physical damages, unfortunately, but different options. Your Impulse Junction is, you get a circumstance bonus of +1 to your AC until the start of your next turn every time you use an impulse. It's essentially permanent +1 AC, which is fantastic. Your Gate Junction options are Critical Blast. If your target is standing on ground, doesn't really matter what that ground is, and they're hit, they're knocked prone. If they're in the air, they get descended 20 feet. So you have a way to pull creatures out of the sky by just critically hitting them with your Elemental Blast. Your Elemental Resistance are against earth and poison. Your Aura Junction is squares in the area are difficult for terrain for enemies trying to get away from you. So they can come in all they want, but getting away, not so much. Yes, this is meant for melee Kineticist builds. And your Skill Junction is Athletics, great, and Hefty Hauler. Not really a great feat, but at least athletics is really good, which means you get that bonus to your athletics checks as you level up. What are our level 1 impulse feats? We start off with Armor in Earth. This is 1 action. You cover yourself in plate-like earthen armor. This armor has a +4 to AC, only a +1 from Dex, +3 strength requirement though, and a -10 to speed, so you're still going to have a -5 even if you meet the strength requirement. This is amazing defense, and at level 3, you get another +1 to AC. You're wearing plate armor by level 3, and it gains the other benefits of being plate. So this is one of the strongest defenses, and you get it as an Earth Kineticist. This lasts 10 minutes or until you dismiss it, so you can definitely set it up before every combat. Geologic Attunement. Level 1, 1 action. You gain Imprecise Tremor Sense in your aura. You can even point out a creature within your aura as a free action each turn. This becomes Precise Sense at 13. And keep in mind that even though your aura is 10 feet right now, you can take a regular feat later on that'll expand it, I think, up to 20 feet. So a 20 feet Precise Tremor Sense at 13 would be pretty solid. Stepping Stones, and I love this one. Level 1, 2 actions. You create stones to cross. These can be 20 feet long horizontally or 10 feet up a wall, and these can make convenient stairs for you to just traverse on early on. Maybe you can't fly, but already at level 1, you can just keep moving around. And you can sustain this up to a minute, so you can keep making these stairs and get yourself places in exploration mode or in combat. Really very cool. I should mention that the stairs will fall away, so you do need to keep sustaining this as you go forward, and the ones from before will fall away. So you're going to have to make sure that you keep sustaining this and keep it going to build yourself the proper stepping stones. Tremor. Level 1, 2 actions, Overflow. Create a 10-foot burst within 30 feet. Creatures make a basic fortitude save against 1d8 bludgeoning damage, and on a crit fail, they'll even fall prone. This goes up by a d8 every 2 levels. Sand Snatcher. This is a level 6, 2-action feat. You create a hand of rock and earth. When summoned, it can attempt to grapple a creature it's next to using your impulse attack. It counts as a creature for flanking as well, not just for you, but for your allies. And when you sustain it every round, you can either move it 20 feet, or if it's an extra creature, you can grapple again, or if it's already grappling somebody, you grapple again. So this could be a great piece of control, but also it adds flanking. It's a very cool mobile thing, and it can even be targeted or destroyed. The Shattered Mountain Weeps. Level 18, 3 actions, Overflow. A sphere of rock explodes in a 20-foot burst within 120 feet of you. All creatures make a basic fortitude save against 9d10 bludgeoning damage. They get knocked prone on a failure, the area becomes difficult terrain, and any creature ending its turn in the area takes 3d10 damage. That's very cool. This is a nice AoE damage option. Granted, level 18, but very fun. Fire. Your Elemental Blast has a range of 60 feet and does 1d6 damage, and it does fire damage. You don't get a choice, it's just fire. Your Impulse Junction is that the damage die of all impulses that do fire damage, so just the fire damage die here, goes up by 1 size, which means most of the time you're taking 1d6s and turning them into 1d8s, which is nice, and that should include your Elemental Blast. Your Gate Junction options, Critical Blast. Your critical elemental blasts do an extra 1d6 persistent fire damage plus any bonus from your Gate Attenuator, which is a special item for Kineticists. Your elemental resistances are fire and cold. Your Aura Junction, enemies have a weakness to fire equal to half your level when they're in your aura. That is very strong, and there's an aura that really takes advantage of that. Skill Junction, Intimidation and Intimidating Glare. Now that is a great pair, especially if you're going to go with Charisma as your secondary ability score to really boost up. Your feats, Burning Jet, level 1, 2 actions. Move up to 40 feet in a straight line, and you ignore difficult terrain, and you don't trigger reactions when you do this. This improves at 6th and 10th level to be farther, and then even allowing you to get into the air as you get higher in level. Elemental Torch, level 1, 1 action. You create an unlimited duration orb of light that creates torch-like heat and light, and it orbits around something of your choice. You can have a number equal to your con modifier at a time, and the light improves at 8th level. So if you want to just create light around, that's the way to do it. Flying Flame, level 1, 2 actions. You send a small flame of your creation 30 feet in any path you want. So this isn't a 30-foot line. This can be 30 feet weaving around, doing whatever you want. Any creature it passes through makes a basic dex save against 1d6 fire damage, going up by 1d6 every 2 levels, and it can only take that damage once per turn, but you can keep throwing these out and weaving it through enemies. And Scorching Column, level 1, 3 actions, Overflow. You create a 10-foot diameter by 30-foot high column of fire in 60 feet of you. All creatures make a basic reflex save against 1d6 fire damage, and it leaves behind smoldering terrain that deals 1 fire damage for each square that somebody crosses. The damage goes up by 1d6 and 2 floor damage per 2 levels, so it's really about kind of creating this painful floor on the ground, but it is nice to do some immediate damage as well. Thermal Nimbus, level 4, 1 action, and a stance. So this will affect your aura. You choose fire or cold, and all allies in the aura gain resistance equal to your level to that element. Every creature that starts its turn in the aura or enters it on their turn takes damage of that type equal to half your level. So keep in mind, your allies would take it, but their resistance is higher than the damage they take, so they're effectively unhurt by it. And if you have the Aura Junction, enemies have half your level as weakness to fire, and you're triggering this. Very cool. The resistance is cumulative with your Junction aura, so this is a great way to trigger extra damage against creatures of fire or cold when they're in your aura, especially fire stacking on fire. This can be a very fun way to do a closer up, more like melee style fire build. All shall end in flames. Level 18, 3 actions, overflow. A 30-foot burst within 500 feet or a 30-foot emanation explodes in flames around you, dealing 13d6, on average about 45, damage, with a basic reflex save to all creatures. Any reduced to 0 die and turn to ash immediately, except you. If you die, because you can include yourself in your own burst or your own emanation, yes, you can, you return to life with 2 times your level in hit points. The resurrection is odd, but can come up so if you are like at 5 health, you can just do this and you don't gain the kind of negatives of dying. You just come back with 36 hit points. The damage is pretty solid and goes up to 15d6 at level 20. Metal. Your elemental blast has a range of 30 feet, deals 1d8 piercing or slashing. Again, no elements, just physical damage types, but options. Your impulse junction, acid, electricity, or piercing damage. Any melee you choose one of those 3. Any melee attack against you takes damage of that type equal to half your level. That's a minimum of 1, so at level 1, they're still taking a damage. Your gate junctions, on a critical blast, you deal 1d6 persistent bleed damage or 1d6 persistent non-typed damage if the creature is made of metal, plus you get a bonus from your gate attenuator like fire did. The nice thing here is that you can affect metal creatures which normally cannot have bleed against them. Elemental resistance are electricity and metal. Your aura junction, enemies take a -1 penalty to all attacks with metal weapons and AC with metal armor. It's very specific. Skill junction, crafting and quick repair. Very solid skill and skill feat. All right, our impulses. Flash forwards, level 1, 2 actions. You can create a weapon or adventuring gear. It will be made entirely of metal. If you create another piece, you have to make a DC 5 flat check or lose a previous one, and otherwise these last for 10 minutes. So if you just need to make yourself something for the current situation, this can be a cool way to do it. Magnetic pinions, level 1, 3 actions, overflow. You fire metal at up to 3 targets within 60 feet of you, so they don't need to be near each other, just any in that range. You get a +1 to your attack roll if the creature is wearing metal armor or is made of metal, dealing 1d4 piercing and 1d4 bludgeoning to each creature that you hit. This counts as 3 attacks for multiple attack penalty, but since it used all 3 actions, it's probably not a big deal, and you only get that multiple attack penalty stack after all 3 are done. This is honestly one of the best AoE damage options at level 1 across all of the different gates. Metal Carapace, level 1, 1 action. You cover yourself in plate-like metal armor. This has +3 AC, +2 from Dex, has a +2 strength requirement, and -5 to speed. So you won't have that -5 if you meet the strength requirement, which is nice. You can also choose to put a shield on in your offhand, and you can even use elemental impulses with that shield-wielding hand, which is cool. It's a nice, unique option here. This lasts 10 minutes unless you dismiss it, and the shield improves as you level up, but the armor itself never will. Shard Strike, level 1, 2 actions. You fire shards or spines. If it shards, it's in a 15-foot cone, dealing 1d6 slashing damage with a basic reflex save, plus 1d6 bleed on a crit fail. If it spines, it's a 30-foot line, dealing 1d6 piercing on a basic reflex save with clumsy 1 on a crit fail. There's some really nice flexibility built in here, even if the damage aren't that high, and they go up by 1d6 each every 2 levels. All right, Rust Wretch, level 8, 2 actions, overflow. Spew rust in a 30-foot cone, dealing 4d8 slashing damage on a basic fort save, 2d6 persistent slashing for metal creatures that fail. So you can really do a lot to metal creatures here, which is nice if that happens to come up. And finally, Hell of a Million Needles. Level 18, 3 actions, overflow. You create a 30-foot cube, so 30 feet on each side, including high, within 500 feet that explodes in spines, dealing 13d6 piercing damage on a basic reflex save. Any that fail become impaled and immobilized, which is gross on this, and you'll see why. There's an escape DC that's equal to your class DC, so getting out of this isn't easy. On a crit fail, that means that they are off guard as well, making it even more painful against any other ranged attacks. This lasts for 1 round, and you can sustain it up to a minute. When you sustain it, Any creatures in the area must make a basic reflex save against 3d12 electricity damage as electricity bounces across this entire set of crazy metal spikes. The whole thing is hazardous terrain, dealing 6 damage per square just for trying to leave. If somebody's in the middle of this when you drop it, this is awful. Just awful. We're up to water. The elemental blast has a range of 30 feet, deals 1d8 cold or bludgeoning damage. Your impulse junction is that after any effects of the impulse have been resolved, you can move one creature involved 5 feet in any direction, 10 feet if they happen to be in water, but not into the air. It must be a willing creature or have failed its save / been hit by your impulse. So yes, this does allow you to push creatures off of edges, and force movement is always good as you can trigger other effects to move them into those. Keep in mind this is force movement, so it won't trigger reactive strikes and things like that if you move your allies. Your gate junctions. Your critical blast deals 2 splash damage per damage die of the same type of damage. So splash damage can be very cool if you happen to target some creature next to its allies. Elemental resistance is against fire and water. Your aura junction, non-magical flames are extinguished and allies in the aura gain fire resistance equal to half your level. Your skill junction is athletics and underwater marauder, which makes sense because we are water. All right, and on to our impulse feats. Deflecting wave, level 1, reaction. When you would take acid, fire, bludgeoning, or slashing damage from a creature or effect, you can blunt the effect with a quick wave. You gain resistance to the damage equal to your level for bludgeoning or slashing, or twice your level for fire or acid. So it's very specific to damage types, but it's solid against those. Ocean's Balm, level 1, 1 action. You touch a willing living creature and restore 1d8 hit points to it and give it resistance 2 to fire damage for 1 minute. If it's on fire, it can make a flat check right then, treating the check as appropriate for having especially helpful aid, so probably just a DC 5, maybe a DC 10, to get rid of that persistence fire damage. The target is then immune to Ocean's Balm for 10 minutes. The healing goes up by D8 and resistance goes up by 1 every 2 character levels, so it's a nice little quick healing option. But remember, once per 10 minutes, so you're not going to constantly do it to somebody. Tidal Hands, level 1, 2 actions overflow. You create either one 30-foot cone or 2 15-foot cones of water that don't overlap. Any creature in the area or areas must make a basic reflex save against 1d8 bludgeoning damage. On a crit fail, they are pushed 5 feet and the damage goes up by 1d8 every 2 levels. So it's a nice little damage option. I like that you can create 2 smaller cones if you want to really choose enemies well. Winter's Clutch, level 1, 2 actions. You create a 10-foot burst within 60 feet of snow. Creatures in the area must make a basic reflex save against 2d4 cold damage. The ground becomes difficult terrain unless the snow is melted, so it's difficult terrain unless somebody uses fire against it, and the damage increases by 1d4 every 2 levels. So not a super high damage ability here, but it is nice to create difficult terrain sometimes and make it hard for those creatures to move. Torrent in Blood, level 6, 2 actions overflow. Waves of water flow out in a 30-foot cone. Each creature gains 3d8 hit points and can attempt a save against a poison or disease they currently have. The conditions can't worsen, so you're not going to make it worse for anybody. The healing goes up by 1d8 every 2 levels, and a creature can only benefit once every 10 minutes. You can see we're kind of stacking healing on top of healing here. Ride the Tsunami. Level 18, 3 actions overflow. A massive wall of water flows forth in a 60-foot cone or 120-foot line. This is 90 foot or 180 foot if you're in water when you use this. Each creature in the area makes a basic reflex save against 10d10 bludgeoning damage, getting pushed 20 feet on a failure or 40 on a crit failure. Small objects of 1 bulk or less get pushed as well all the way to the edge of the water. You can swim to anywhere in the water as part of the impulse after the damage has been done. So you want to move to anywhere in that cone or line, you are welcome to do so, which is very cool for repositioning yourself while you're doing a ton of damage. Finally, Wood. Elemental Blast, range 30 feet, deals 1d8 bludgeoning or vitality damage, which is very unique and very cool. Your Impulse Junction is you gain temporary hit points equal to your level until the start of your next turn. So you basically have permanent temporary hit points, which is really nice. Your Gate Junctions, Critical Blast. If the target is surface adjacent, so they're standing on ground or next to a wall or whatever, they become immobilized. It's a DC 10 athletics to get free, and it's always that, which is nothing. But they still have to waste an action to do it. It doesn't work against like ghosts or things that made of liquid, but otherwise, you're just forcing them to waste an action to get away. Your elemental resistances are poison and wood. Your aura junction allies starting their turn in the aura gain 1 temporary hit point, 2 at level 10 and 3 at 15, and they last until the start of the next turn. Sadly, those numbers are kind of low, but temp HP is nice. Your skill junction is survival with terrain expertise. I know we haven't talked about that skill yet, but it's okay. I like survival, so it's not bad. On to the feats. We have fresh produce, level 1, 1 action. You create a piece of healing fruit in your hands, and it heals for 1d4 plus 1 hit point to whoever eats it, and gives them plus 2 void damage resistance. The resistance lasts for 10 minutes, during which the creature feels full and can't eat another fruit. The healing increases by a d4 plus 5 every 2 levels. A d4 plus 5 is actually really solid. And the void resist also goes up by 2. If you create it and it isn't eaten, however, by the start of your next turn, it withers and dies. So you need to create it and feed it to somebody within that same turn, including yourself possibly. Hail of Splinters. Level 1, 2 actions, overflow. You create a 30-foot cone of flying splinters that deal 1d4 piercing and 1d4 persistent bleed damage against a basic reflex save. Both damages increase by a d4 every 2 levels. Hardwood armor. Level 1, 1 action. You cover yourself in wood armor. It has AC plus 3 with Dex modifier of plus 2. Plus 2 strength requirement with a minus 5 speed, so very similar to the metal. And like the metal, you can create a shield in your offhand that allows you to still use impulses. This is a wooden shield, and if it's broken, it decays. This lasts 10 minutes like the other armors, and the shield improves every 3 levels, just like it did for metal, but the armor itself will never improve. Timber Sentinel, 2 actions. You create a protector tree. So this is using the summon from the spell protector tree within 30 feet, and the level is equal to your, basically you're using your level as a spell level here. So at level 1, it'll be the spell level 1 version. At level 3, it'll be like the spell level 2 version. This is a tree with level 1 with 10 AC and 10 hit points that can take damage from a strike that is meant for an adjacent ally. And you don't use a spell slot to make them, because normally this is a spell slot spell. And if you make another, the previous one just becomes a normal tree. So not only does this give you like kind of an infinite defense for allies, which is crazy, and at early levels this will just absorb all sorts of damage, you can make a forest at level 1. Just keep doing this. You can just make a forest. This is one of the strongest level 1 feats, just flat out. Wooden Palisade, level 6, 3 actions, overflow. You create a 30-foot long, 20-foot high wooden wall. It has a ledge on one side and ladders that lead up to the ledge. This means you and your team can stand atop the wall and fire down behind partial cover. For 3 actions you can make this possible. That is amazing, and the tactical utility of this cannot be oversold. It's fantastic. Rouse the Forest's Fury. Level 18, 3 actions, overflow. You create 3 large trees that spring up within 500 feet, at least 15 feet apart from each other. These have really solid stats, including 200 hit points each. When they appear, each can attack with some decent attack modifiers that's listed in here, either making melee or ranged attacks. Yes, they can throw ranged attacks. If they hit with a melee attack, the creature is also grabbed. This ends at the end of your next turn, but you can sustain it, and every time you sustain it, one of the 3 trees can make an attack either ranged or melee. This is an amazing tactical tool, and keep in mind that they are bodies. If enemies decide to attack them, it's kind of like just giving your team free hit points because trees you summoned are being attacked instead of you. All right, so that gives you a taste for the different types of things you can do with the different gates, what they're good at, what they lean into. But I want to go through the rest of the level 1 feats because it's not all gate impulse feats. There are level 1 feats that are for any gate. So none of these require a specific gate to take and can still help you generally speaking. The first is Elemental Familiar, level 1. This is a familiar that relates to the gate or one of the gates you chose. The only difference between this and other familiars is that you use your con mod for its bonus to perception, stealth, and acrobatics modifiers rather than, a different primary ability score. Extended Kinesis. This is level 1. This adds more options for your base Kinesis feature, so this isn't its own thing, but your base Kinesis can do a certain number of things, and this just adds different cool things you can do. Again, generally speaking, this is out-of-combat stuff to help mess with the environment, but very fun, and you could attempt to use them in combat depending on what you want to do. Versatile Blasts. This adds a new damage type for every single elemental blast that you can choose when you blast. So for air, it'll add cold, for earth, poison, for fire, cold, for metal, electricity, water gets acid, and wood gets poison. So if you want to vary up some of these even more than they already have, this could be a decent way to do that. And then Weapon Infusion. This one is, in my opinion, a really strong ability. This is a free action. You can shape your elemental blast into a weapon form before using them. So when you're going to go blast, this is when you use Weapon Infusion. Not only is this amazing for roleplay, but it's just plain valuable. Okay, so what are the benefits? First of all, when you change it, you can change the damage type to bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing as fits the weapon you created. So if you don't want to keep the element, you can change to one of those. Great, that's 3 more types for some of them, where they don't even have those as options. You get to add a weapon trait also onto the blast. If you chose to make a melee blast, you can add agile, backswing, forceful, reach, or sweep. All of them fantastic in different situations. And remember, you're getting to choose when you do it. So you choose the one that fits your situation. If you want to know what those do, I have a video about those traits. Go check it out. If you're going with range, you can choose an increment of 100 feet that has volley 30, or a range increment of 50 feet that gets propulsive, which is a very strong choice, or you can choose a range of 20 that gets thrown. These are incredible options that make any elemental blast so much better. If you're going with an elemental blast heavy build, I would consider this a necessary choice to be really effective. Okay, give a couple others here. Nothing crazy, but I just want to show some of the things that are available at higher levels. Kinetic Activation, level 2. You can activate magic items that are usually reserved for spellcasters, which is fantastic. The only requirement is that the spells have to share a trait with one of your gates. So, if you're casting Fireball with a wand, to use that wand, you have to have the Fire Gate. But this means scrolls, wands, and even staves are on the table for you to use. To charge a staff, by the way, with a number of charges equal to half your level rounded up for free. This is so good, especially if you're going to keep yourself at range. This is just absolutely incredible. Chain Infusion, level 10, 1 action. This is essentially a spell shape, right? We talked about the infusions. This is essentially a spell shape you're going to apply to your next elemental blast. If that blast hits a creature, you can then make an attack roll at another creature within blast range from it. So let's say you've got 30 feet. The first creature has to be within 30 feet of you. The next creature has to be within 30 feet of that one. And you can keep bouncing this up to 5 targets. However, your multiple attack penalty applies as they go, so eventually you'll probably miss and it'll end. But as long as they keep hitting, they'll keep bouncing, and you can blast multiple creatures all in one elemental blast. The one caveat here is, if you did a melee blast against the first target, that extra strength damage only counts against melee enemies. It's not going to count as a bounce to ranged enemies. Also, you can only hit the same creature once, so you can't bounce back and forth. Elemental Transformation, level 10, 1 action, once per day. You are a single gate kineticist, so lots of requirements here. Rather than activating your element, you can simply change into an elemental. You use the elemental form spell to become an elemental matching your gate. You can use any spell rank up to half your level rounded up in order to change this. So that means equivalent to a spellcaster using it at their spell level, their highest for the level. If you really want to turn it into an elemental and get that feeling, this is a great way to go. Remember, you can only have a single gate and you're level 10. So by now you could, if you wanted to, have up to 4 gates going on. Kinetic Pinnacle, level 20. You are permanently quickened, and you can use the extra action for one of the following things. Either channel elements, so this removes the tax for 3 action overflows, because now it's just free. So it means you get 3 action overflow turn after turn after turn. Or you can use a 1 action elemental blast, in case your elements are already channeled. Or you can use a 1 action impulse stance. So usually you're going to want to use this to channel elements after using overflows constantly. Very strong. All right, so let's jump over to our class breakdown graph. So we'll look on screen here. Kineticists are hands down as versatile as you can be. Even more so than spellcasters, as they can use their abilities endlessly, and with all the feats combinations of gates and possibilities, you can create the most versatile playstyle imaginable. Finally, you can take feats that allow you to choose different feats at different times with sufficient downtime if you want even more versatility. So you can even change up your gameplay mid-session if you want to, as long as you've got some time. Versatility on top of versatility. When we start looking at damage, we find a slightly different story. Kineticists are not your hardest hitting characters, generally speaking. However, when we look at single target damage, their Elemental Blast does allow for some respectable damage dealing. If you're willing to attack in melee, you get to add your strength, and of course you can add your con if you're doing a 2-action. Honestly, it's not bad for a single target. Now, as far as your damage going up with Elemental Blast, you saw it in the stat block, but it does go up every so many levels. So you are adding more dice as you go up, meaning that it does increase on its own, even though you can't add any specific potency runes or anything. There are elements to help with that, and there are ways to increase the damage. Also, if you take the ability to boost your critical blast, you can get some very cool crit specialization type effects out of your different elements. So they aren't the lowest single target damage class, certainly by any means. They sit above spellcasters, but they don't reach the power of most martials, which is why they land here with a 3. With the AoE damage, they live in a similar space, except unlike Elemental Blast, your abilities to deal AoE damage is very dependent on which elements you choose. Fire, for instance, has some solid options for AoE damage, in fact, mostly AoE damage, while Earth are generally lacking in AoE damage, except for certain ones, like I mentioned with the high-level stuff. As there are not resource costs for these abilities, the damage is toned down compared to spells, but again, you can do them endlessly. Either way, you're still head and shoulders above all martials in this category. It's just you won't hit as hard as a spellcaster, so I'm going to give this 3 again. If AoE damage was element dependent, it doesn't even come close to how gate dependent control is. While Earth might allow it to grapple enemies with hands made of pebbles, Fire won't grant you so much control. So some elements are great at knocking enemies prone, others at forced movement, and others at immobilization. How well your Kineticist succeeds in this space will be up to you. This is not a category where I can say it falls right between martials and casters, though, because both martials and casters can be good at control. Yes, casters are generally better with stronger control options that last longer, and the control from martials usually isn't amazing. But when I look across all the options of all the gates, I do feel the control is not the strongest suit. So I'm going to give them, you know what? I'm going to give them a 3 here as well. But it really depends on the gate. You've noticed kind of a theme here. It's really up to you how good you are at any of these things. Support falls into a similar place, but I do think that the class does a better job here. Yes, fire isn't going to provide you any way to help your allies. Well, minus a few, I guess, aura effects. Air, water, and wood, and earth all will, though. Air can grant allies greater movement, both on and off their turns. Water and wood can provide some great healing options, some of which are AoE healing. Wood can add defensive measures, like trees to soak up damage and walls. Almost all of them can add walls, which is a nice support and control feature. Not only do Kineticists outdo martials in their support category, they shame several spellcasters with less support focus than certain spell traditions. It is possible to build a Kineticist with no support, sure, but because there are so many options to build great support characters, I'm going to give them a 4 in this category. Finally, we have survivability. Kineticists can be hard to kill. They have lots of HP thanks to focusing on con, amazing fortitude saves, and half the gates provide armor options. I think Earth's the best, but I think they're all really good. They can have amazing movement, some can fly, some can teleport, kind of. There are ways to gain resistances and eventually immunities. This is one of the greatest qualities of the class. Sure, they won't be as challenging to kill as something like a champion most of the time, but honestly, they're pretty much in that same bucket. They get a 5 in survivability. While there are multiple ways to build your Kineticist, when it comes to ability scores, you'll likely choose based off of what gate you plan on using and what kind of role you want to play in the battlefield. Because your primary attack is based on con, you're going to have con maxed out. But behind that, you've got strength and dex, which are both valuable depending on what kind of build you want to make. At the same time, Kineticists only get light armor, right? So By default, if you're not going to take one of the armors, you're probably going to want Dex more than you want Strength. And finally, while there are no aspects of the class that necessarily hand you reasons to take Charisma, Wisdom, or Intelligence, you may have a preference for one above the others, or even want to go into one of them in a heavy way because you want to go with certain skills. Kineticists, yes, they are terrible skill monkeys because of their primary ability score, but maybe you want to increase int so you have more skills, or maybe you want charisma to be really good at, say, the social aspect of play. So here are some suggestions about how you can build and where to put your stats depending on what you want to do. So the first is kind of a standard ranged combat build where you aren't focused on skills at all, where you really focus on, obviously, con first. That'll be true for all these, but then dexterity. This will help boost your armor the most. You get that nice +3 to help with your light armor, and you can get to a good AC. Wisdom is just a good choice here. This will, of course, help for your will saves and give you some interesting options, especially around perception to be better. Then charisma, int, and strength, as those ones you can kind of switch around as you need, but aren't the most important. You might want strength if you plan on attacking up in melee, but you really shouldn't do that with this kind of design. Keep in mind, if you have con, dex, and wisdom as your top 3, all of your saves are going to be in a pretty good place. Next, for melee builds, and I really like melee builds with this class, it's strength as your second instead of dex, because you can take one of the armor choices and have a good AC still, while being able to deal extra damage up in melee and potentially grapple if you want to, because you only need one free hand to do impulses. Still having some dex in there, because all of the armor choices do need some dexterity, or can use some, with wisdom and then charisma and after that. Wisdom really for the saves and for perception. Okay, so those are kind of my two primary build designs in mind. But if you want a melee build without taking one of the armor impulses, so you want to go melee with water or melee with air or fire, then I'd go with a con dex strength build. You still want strength in there to add a little more damage from your melee impulse, from your melee elemental blasts, but you want higher attacks because you really need the armor. A kineticist without enough dex or without one of the armors really is in a vulnerable place because of light armor only. Finally, we have an interesting design for a skill monkey style build. Con is number 1, but then you go high int. That's to get you as many skills as possible, followed by dex for some armor, and then whichever ability scores you want to really lean into the different skills you have chosen. I said charisma here, thinking, okay, maybe I want to be good in, intimidation or something. But this can be an interesting choice, and just something to think about. I wouldn't say it's my primary. I like the first 2 more, but this one's all right. So what would an easy level 1 build be in my mind? So for a nice straightforward level 1 build, I would recommend going with a melee build because it allows you to be on the battlefield and you're still good at range, but if you get up close, you're not in a bad place. I'd go with the Earth Gate, take a +4 con, +3 in strength, +1 in wisdom, and +1 in dex. Take armor in earth and tremor. So armor in earth will give you an amazing AC at level 1. For taking just 1, you get the impulse junction, which means you're going to get +1 to your AC, so you're going to have an incredibly high AC at level 1, constantly a 19 as you're walking around. Tremor is so that it gives you a nice AoE option, because you're going to have very strong elemental blasts, especially because you've got that +3 in strength. If you're doing melee blasts, you're going to hit pretty hard. And I'm going to go with Weapon Infusion as our class non-gate related feat, because with this build, you're really about leaning into your elemental blasts heavily, and that Weapon Infusion is everything for boosting elemental blasts. It really is incredible. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and provide a combat example to show off the Kineticist gameplay. Our kineticist here, Rocky, has arrived back in town looking for a drink to find it infested with the mindless undead. They haven't noticed him quite yet, as he channels Earth, covering his body in stone. Thank you, Armor and Earth. This action grabs the attention of the shambling horrors, and all creatures roll initiative. Rocky ends up in the middle of the order here. One of the zombies spends its 2 actions to move up to our hero. Given they are permanently slowed 1, they aren't able to attack. Despite being surrounded, Rocky will rush up past the creature, and for 2 actions, create a tremor underneath the 2 undead who have yet to move. They each make fortitude saves. 1 saves and 1 fails. The damage roll is a single d8. We get a 6. The terrain within the space is now difficult terrain, and our kinetic aura drops because that has the overflow trait. On the plus side, Rocky has a +1 AC until the start of his next turn, thanks to the single gate impulse junction, putting him at a 19 AC.
Being unintelligent, the shambling zombies attempt to pass through the difficult terrain as it's the most direct route to our combatant, and they will not clear the area with the 2 actions that they each get. Back to our first zombie. It is able to get up to us with a single action and take a swing. It only has a 40% chance to hit Rocky and a 5% chance to crit him, thanks to armor and earth. The zombie rolls a 14 and does hit. It deals 6 damage of Rocky's massive 22 hit points at level 1 and rolls an athletics check to grab him. Our Kineticist has a huge fortitude DC of 19, and the roll 10 by the zombie just won't cut it. Rocky is getting tired of these mindless creatures. He starts by channeling elements and channels Earth for 1 action using the free 1 action Elemental Blast against the undead up next to him. With a roll of 8, the total of 15 is still a hit, dealing 1d8 plus 3, thanks to adding the Strength mod in melee. This deals a total of only 5 damage. With his last 2 actions, Rocky forms a mighty great sword of loose rock and brings it down upon the head of the snarling creature. With an attack roll of 15 for a total of 17, thanks to multiple attack penalty, it is a hit. This attack was made with 2 actions using slashing damage, adding the forceful trait, which means the damage is 1d8 plus 3 for strength, plus 4 for con modifier, plus 1 for forceful, for a total of 12 damage. But the zombie has a weakness, 5 to slashing, for a grand total of 17 damage, which is more than enough to drop it permanently. The other 2 each take 1 action, dragging their forms up to Rocky. The first won't have flanking because it got there first for its attack roll. The second will flank. The flanking creature lands a hit for 8 damage, but still no success pinning him down. With elements still channeled, Rocky walks away, turns around and lets loose another tremor. This will drop one of the zombies as the other barely stays on its feet. The final undead meanders through the rubble before meeting a stone hammer to the face. Hopefully this gave you a feel for the versatility and power available even at level 1 for a Kineticist, and in the case I chose only 1 gate, so even more versatile if you choose 2. There are some amazing pop culture references here for the Kineticist, but let's be honest, what did you think of most? You thought of the characters from Avatar: Last Airbender. We'll talk about Aang at a different time, but he's probably the one that popped into your head first. There are other examples, though, like X-Men, for instance, Iceman being a good example of this, but plenty of elemental characters in pop culture. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Kineticist. I know it was a long one, and we're going to have another long one coming up because we are going to rank the elements against each other. But for now, think about how best to use Earth in your daily life, and as always, adventure on.